Good evening. Welcome to the Carson City Airport Authority meeting on Wednesday, October 19th. I'd like to get a roll call and determination of a quorum, please.
Chairperson Golden,
Here.
Vice Chair Pulitz,
Here.
Treasurer Rogers,
Here.
Member Jones, Member Hamilton, Member Hutter, Member Norvell.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you so much. Stan, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The chairman reserves the right to modify the agenda as he sees fit to most effectively process the meeting, and I don't see any reason to modify the agenda. So we'll move on to public comment. Public comment is a time for members of the public who wish to address the airport authority, and they may speak on any agendized or non-agendized matter related to the airport. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person or topic. If the item you're commenting on requires any extended discussion, let me know to calendar the matter at a future airport authority meeting. So do we have any public comment this evening? Yes, sir. Oh, geez. Thanks, Stan. We'll take. How about we take it out of order since we're already on this? So, do we have any public comment or no? Yeah, or you can comment if it's on the actual agenda item. Okay, go ahead, please.
Push the little button.
Yeah, and please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Veronica Clemens, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Cactus Air Force, LLC. We were interested in one of your hangars that came vacant and is available. We wanted to get more information regarding that. Will that be for sale? So we have very many questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're not permitted to really discuss the matter with you. However, I would encourage you, based on my knowledge, to stick around for the meeting today because that matter will be addressed.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Stan, thanks for pointing that out. Approval of the minutes of past meetings of the Airport Authority. Any questions, comments, members of the Airport Authority? Okay, a motion to approve minutes of the past meetings of the Airport Authority. Do we have a second?
Second.
Got plenty of seconds. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Airport engineers report. Is Nadine on the line today?
Chris Knox.
Or Chris Knox?
Chris Knox should be
Hello,
on
Chris.
the line.
Good afternoon, or good evening, Mr. Chair and authority members. Our biggest up is Strong family grew by one last week. Nadine had a healthy baby boy last Thursday.
Hey.
So we now have one more member in the Armstrong family for sure. So
Cool.
you guys, unfortunately, are all stuck dealing with me for the next several weeks. So bear with me as I get back up to speed on how everything's going. I am prepared though to give our report. We do have a couple projects in the works. I see Mike Dickin just joined in. I'll skip over the SRE equipment and circle back to that one, and Mike can give us an update on the status of the SRE equipment. But we are working through the aeronautical survey. There's a couple phase projects. So the first phase of that work is largely complete, just pending a grant closeout, and that was essentially the conceptual design, if you will, for the approach and the related offset PAPI and approach lighting system. We've transitioned into the second phase of that project, which is the full design of the offset PAPI and mouse subsystem. And then we're on track to do the third phase next year in 2023, funding permitting. But we do have one pending item related to that project, and that is involving the removal of a small tree on BLM land that was identified as a obstruction to the proposed approach. But it seems like that's we're able to mitigate that by removing that tree. I know Corey's been working on that. Other than the nighttime approach procedures being in the works, we do have the snow removal equipment building that is basically ready for rebid. So I don't know. We've seen a couple go letters go out this week. I've not seen Carson City's go out yet to see whether that project is identified for funding in 2023, but we are ready to bid that as soon as it is ready for funding. And then Mike Dickin, if you want to give us just a quick update on the snow removal equipment acquisition.
He's muted.
So I spoke to the Hankey representative on October 10th. The chassis for your vehicle is in production or starting production with International Harvester and is scheduled to be delivered to the Hankey factory in early January, which means that it should be available for delivery to the airport by the end of January 2023.
So that essentially covers our update items. Are there any items folks have questions on or want us to expand on any further?
Nope.
Okay,
Thank you for your report. We appreciate it.
thank you.
Okay, moving on here. We'll go to public hearings, discussion and possible action. We're going to review a cost-benefit analysis and determine how to proceed with a new ground lease and selling of the shade tree hangar or renting the hangar outright. Corey's prepared a comparative analysis, and I'll let him take the opportunity to present that at this time.
Okay, this is Corey Jenkins, and this item is complex. So I'll review a few items, and then I'll go into the comparative analysis. And I also got some additional information just prior to this meeting that I'll be going over as well that will impact the data in the comparative analysis. So this hangar was tenant owned and occupied until August of 2022. That ground lease was not renewed, so that now that the improvements there, that hangar, are now property of the airport authority. So the airport authority needs to make a decision as to what to do with this property exactly moving forward. That lease, some history, that was started back in 1981 with Sage Air. It was later assigned to Shade Tree Aviation, and the lease was restated in 2014, including the 3-year extension plus an additional 2 years, which of course ended in August of 2022. I'm going to go into the comparative analysis here. So the objective of this analysis is to try to identify what the best option is, either selling this property or putting it out to lease as the entire property. Some information about the process. The data used in this was derived from an appraisal, a formal appraisal. It's important to note that this appraisal is a draft and it's not a final appraisal. But they worked really hard to get us a draft so that we could use it in this board meeting today. Some of the things they looked at are the sale of the building, a ground lease rate for the land, which that parcel as of right now is about 25,000 square feet, and then also a rental of the hangar itself. We also received a quote for the construction that may be required in order to get that building up to code. This has not been reviewed by the city, so we can't say 100% that all of these items would in fact be required. This is a worst case scenario. If we had to do all of these things, this is what a total cost would be, and it was rounded up as about $300,000. We believe that some of that work could be done internally, and also we may be able to remove some of those items if they are in fact not required by the city for us to complete them. We also received a quote from Thompson Garage Doors. The hangar door would require minimal work. It functions just as it is, but some of the rollers are wearing to the point where they should be replaced, and that's about it. Other information. I generated some estimates for insurance costs and maintenance costs based off of information provided by other airport users. These numbers are estimates, and we don't have exact information for these numbers. Some of the airport users that contributed are Weaver Aircraft, Sterling Air, and Mountain West Aviation. In here, we include an estimate of 5% for the CPI increases. Obviously, we're not going to know what those CPI increases are going to be exactly. Right now, they would probably be somewhere up around 10%, but historically, they've been as low as around 2%. I used 5% to be a representation to include a CPI increase. If the CPI increases are higher than 5%, it would create a greater gap between the two options because the lease option will be impacted by CPI more heavily than sale. If CPI is lower, the two numbers will be closer together. For the sale of the hangar, in order to estimate some of the potential uses for those funds that could generate revenues, I used a estimated 3% return if that money was invested over time. So the numbers, for if the hangar was to be leased, this would be for the pad that the hangar sits on. So this only includes the 10,000 square foot pad of the hangar itself. This does not include any additional land. The initial price, according to the appraisal, would be 50 cents per square foot per month. The total income minus the estimated expenses would be $5,089,751.86. So for the sale calculation includes the sale of the hangar as well as a ground lease for the total area of the current parcel. So that includes the sale of the hangar and a ground lease for 25,000 square feet. According to the appraisal, minus the work required, so the appraisal came in at like 1.1 million, minus the work required of estimated 300,000, we would gain $800,000 from the sale. That value, if invested over a 50-year period, comes out to $3,507,125. The ground lease over a 50-year period would generate income of $637,418.76 for a total profit of $4,144,544. Now at this point, it's important for me to go ahead and add the additional information that I've gained earlier today. This is coming from Steve Lewis. His opinion is that the 50-cent rate is low. He also provided some supporting materials to support that opinion, which I'm not able to share today because that is some private information. But I can tell you that the averages come out to that number being around 64 cents a square foot. This is an estimate. This is not from the appraisal, but if we provide this additional information as comps for the appraiser, they'll probably include that for their final draft, and we'll get a more exact number. So that rate being 64 cents as being the initial per square foot per month on a lease of the hangar would ultimately result in the total profit at the end of the 50-year period of being around $6,722,018.64. So that is an additional factor to consider here if we were to add an additional lease option at what we believe this final appraisal could come out to. Some other factors to consider. This analysis does show that the lease would be more profitable over the period of time, either at the 50-cent rate or at the potential 64-cent rate. But that does not factor in the additional workload for airport staff. And it also does not factor in unknowns. The maintenance cost here is, we've got some rough numbers for roof repairs, heater replacement, and then your typical hangar door maintenance over time. But there's definitely the potential for additional maintenance costs that are unknown to us at this time. It would take about 4.5 years to recoup the initial expense for the lease option, and that's at the 50-cent rate. Of course, at the 64-cent rate, it would be faster than that. The FAA may take interest in the decision that the board makes on this item, particularly because of a specific grant assurance. The language in that grant assurance is that the airport must make decisions that make the airport as self-sustaining as possible. That is unique to the airport, so each airport out there will have factors that will impact whether or not a decision is in fact the most self-sustaining as possible. But I think it's important for the board to be aware of that grant assurance requirement, and y'all should consider that in your decision making today. In the end here, the findings, I don't believe that the findings at the 50-cent rate show that any one option is in fact superior to the other. The approximate $1 million additional revenues over a sale at the 50-cent rate could potentially be offset by additional staff workload and unexpected other expenses. At the rate of 64 cents, it definitely makes the lease option far more favorable if the final appraisal ends up being 64 cents. I think another important thing to note here is an option that the board does have is to accept bids for a sale or a lease, and then judge those bids at that time to see what the best option is for the board. So ultimately, hopefully this has provided y'all with the information that you need to make a decision, and if y'all have any questions for me, I'm happy to address those.
Thank you, Corey. Going to open this up to my counterparts here on the authority. So Harlow.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a couple of questions. One, on the maintenance costs over time. And a long-term lease like this, would the lease contain certain things that the lessee would be responsible for with respect to the building?
So the lease can absolutely put some maintenance requirements on the tenant. That is an option, and to the extent of what that is, the board could choose how they want to handle that. So I think the airport would ultimately be responsible for some maintenance items, but the occupant could be held responsible for repairs up to a certain dollar value, or that pertain to certain things. And of course, if they do their own improvements, they would be responsible for those.
And did you mention that the comps were from Reno?
So the comps used in this appraisal, they are available in the board packet. Let me pull those up right now. The majority of them are from Reno International. Very few of them are from our airport. One of them that is from our airport is a group of T hangars. And the other one that was used is a comparable hangar. There are more comps available, and I think that the appraiser will utilize more comps from our airport in the final draft of their appraisal.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Point of clarification before we discuss this any further. This particular facility, this leasehold, is an FBO designation. It is not intended for dry aircraft storage. Now, we may get bids for that, but the reality of the matter is there's probably a higher value placed upon it because it is an FBO designation that has run with the property. So just point of reference on that. Yes, Dan.
A couple of questions. What are the major improvements? The door and what else? When you said the improvements were required.
Well, improvements would actually include everything there, including the hangar itself. But inside of that hangar there is the door, of course. There's also a 2-story space that's a office space that's / storage that contains multiple rooms in there. Then a lot of that is kind of the source for a lot of the expense of our initial expense, because some of it would definitely have to be removed because it's not to code. So that would be a contributing factor to that.
You mentioned additional staff workload. What are you talking about and how much?
So right now, airport staff manages ground leases only. This would be managing a building in addition to ground leases. Because of that, it's possible that the airport would field more phone calls related to items that you deal with a building that are different from what you'd be dealing with a ground lease. Now, this is a metal building, and it's typically a metal building is going to have about 100-year lifespan. And because of that, and with the fact the airport would essentially only be responsible for the metal building and that hangar door in the end, I don't expect it to be a huge workload increase for airport staff. But it would be in addition to what we do now.
No, I understand. I just wondered if there was. Thank you, though.
All right.
Thanks, Dan. John, do you have any questions or comments?
I don't have any questions, but I do have an opinion, which if we're at the opinion stage of the. Okay. I've done some real estate work before, and I'm very attuned to the concept that real estate doesn't maintain itself. So I am definitely opinionated that adding the management of a building represents a significant mission drift for the airport authority. That all we do now is manage land, and to add buildings for the first time. Well, not for the first time, but adding a significant amount of building work to our scope of work represents mission drift, and I am not enthused for that. I also think that we have always in the past on the airport authority, we've been very careful to not compete with our tenants. And if we start leasing hangar space, I would say that we're, shifting that relationship with our tenants and with our tenants that also may have hangars to lease. And I don't prefer that. And so for those reasons, I think that I would be most interested in not becoming an entity that leases hangars. Just keep it at land only.
Thanks, John. Paul, anything you want to add to this?
Generally, right now, what our airport really needs is a good maintenance facility. Okay, our maintenance options for our piston guys have generally gone down. So, however we do this or whatever we do, I think we really need to kind of focus on. If I was to decide who was to go in there, it would be someone to do maintenance for our general piston aircraft. So I think that's highly needed. So whatever we do, I think we should do that. My other question is, if we're going to lease this out, can we do it would the lease be for a 5, 10, 50-year? Or what period can we do that? Are we free to lease it to any period?
Steve Takis, Airport Council. Under the Nevada revised statutes, we can lease for up to 50 years. Many airports lease for lower time periods. When we lease bare land, the strong argument to lease it for 50 years is you want to give the tenant an adequate time period to amortize their investment. If they're going to build a bunch of hangars on it, you want to give them time to recover that investment. Here, maybe it's a little different because there's already a hangar there. That would be for you guys to decide, but you could go all the way up to 50 years.
Okay, so all the way up to 50 years for lease. Now, what about if we sold the, so we have the option to go on leasing up to 50 years. Now, what if we sold the building and then just did the ground lease? Would we also be, is there any time limits on when we could lease that?
No, the statutes for leasing and for sale are almost identical for county property, which is what we fit under. It's NRS 244, section 282 is for sale of property, and I think 283 is for leasing of property, and they read almost the same. You adopt a resolution, you set a minimum price, you take bids, and when sale, I mean, there's no time period on that, but the lease, certainly you could do that part for 50 years. When you sell it, it's gone. It's sold forever. It's not sold for a time period. So, yeah.
So, so we're talking about selling the building, not the property. We would still be leasing the property.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue is, do you lease it as an improved piece of property with a building, or do you sell the building and then just lease the ground part? I think those are the two options that are out there. And you can do either, or we could style a resolution for you to adopt at the next meeting where you accept bids for either one and you decide which way to go. I think, the big issue is, do you really want to do that maintenance and get into that maintenance part of the process? I think that's where you get the real issues.
Tim?
Okay, thanks, Chairman Michael. I have a lot to say about this. As many of you know, I am a real estate developer. I'm currently developing real estate in Northern Nevada, and I have quite a few other past histories of developing real estate. I personally, I'm very enthusiastic about keeping the building and leasing it. And I'm going to tell you why. First of all, I want to thank Corey for getting all the preliminary data that he brought to us by getting some opinions on costs of upgrading and bringing to code, giving us some idea of what leases may or may not be able to we could get for that facility as a landlord. I'm glad he everything he got. To me, all of his data is on the low side. I know personally, when it comes to leases on the airport right now, as being a tenant paying a lease, that those lease prices are going up, and they're up higher than what your appraised value is showing currently, just from my own experience and seeing what's going on around the airport. It's going up a lot. And the cost of building buildings has doubled or tripled since, you can ask the Ortiz boys how much it's costing to build that.
Jet Ranch is going up 15% on January 1st.
I got that information,
my airplane
yes.
is, yeah.
Yes, so I think that those estimates, although I'm glad we have them, I think they're a little conservative, but that's okay. That gives us something to work with, so I'm very respectful of that. And thank you for getting that to us. I spent some time on this with Corey regarding the potential to have to upgrade the building to fire sprinklers. Now, the architect we talked to thought that we may be required to do so. He doesn't know for sure. He hasn't talked to the city of Carson. However, I can tell you that there was a recent sale of an FBO with a similar sized building a couple of years ago on our airport that did not have sprinklers, had similar use, and was not required to put in sprinklers when they sold the property, when they sold the building. So that's over $100,000 of the cost right there to bring in the sprinklers and the line, the fire line in. So I'm glad we have the worst case scenarios presented to us. I'm not certain it's going to end up having to be that. We'll find out when we talk to the city, right? That's what's going to happen. Possibly they can say because the city technically owns the building through us, they may want to be more conservative and they want to make us do it. That's their prerogative. They have that prerogative. But all things being equal, it doesn't make sense to me that they could make one use have to do it, the other use not. So that's another point I have. So I think the costs, that's one cost that may be eliminated. Another cost that will be eliminated is we don't necessarily have to use a general contractor to do all the upgrade. We can actually hire independent subs, licensed subs to do the work independently. And we'll probably save about 30% to more of the cost associated with that by just hiring this, hiring the plumber, hiring the handyman, hiring the guy, the electrician, the door guy, the demo. Just from my own experience, I know you can save a lot of money doing that. I'm also I also believe that when it comes to maintenance, I think we're kind of getting a little too concerned about the maintenance, and I'll tell you why. We can sign a lease with a triple net lease terms where the tenant is required to maintain all the things required for the building. That is customary and that's standard. That's not what we do with ground leases, but that's something you can do with a facility on it. You can say that the ground lease is this much per month. The actual building itself, you're responsible for all those maintenance items, the door, the leaky roof, the blah, 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 blah. You put it into your lease, and if the tenant wants it, they'll lease it, and that's their responsibility. I mean, that is a normal, typical way of doing a lease. So there's so many things that we can look at that we can, before we make a decision based on resources and costs. I also want to say that what's nice about keeping the building, getting it up and getting it leased is we can change our mind down the road. We could do a 3-year lease. We could do a 5-year lease. At the end of 5 years, you know what? It's not really working out the way we wanted. Let's go ahead and sell it. There's nothing to preclude us from changing based on current situations in our airport and what's going on in the community and with the inflation and blah, blah, blah. I just know, being a developer, this was a gift to our airport. We're not going to get too many of these. Most people are going to renegotiate their leases. Seldom ever going to happen, right, Corey? We're not going to get this too often where we actually get a building handed back to us.
It may happen again in the future, and that's an important thing to note is, this would impact the decisions in the future as well.
Could. It doesn't mean we're my point is that most of the people around our airport are trying to get extensions, not just bail out on their leases, on their ground leases. So with all that being said, I'm going to support, I support trying to do everything we can to actually keep the building and lease it to a Cactus Air Force or to a maintenance facility or someone else on the airport that could help this airport. That's my preference, but I would be more than willing to go ahead and put together a bid packet that has got both lease options and purchase options and see where the chips fall. I mean, because I respect everybody's opinions, but I do know that from my point of view, for the airport, that was a found asset that just kind of fell into our lap, and I just hate to let it go. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. I concur with you, my 110%. My position on this was going to be we should put this out to bid, see what the market brings us. You're 110% correct on something else. All of my leases for all of my tenants, they are responsible for all the maintenance. It's very common. And occasionally I'll have a lease where we are responsible for any structural deficit or the roof, and that's the end of it. They're responsible for everything. Sometimes we're nice with our tenants. They have a problem. We'll fix it. We won't charge them for it. But generally speaking, they're responsible for the maintenance, insurance, taxes, utilities, complete triple net lease. So I understand where you're coming from, John, on mission drift. if we're not maintaining the building, I would hope you'd be comfortable with it. But my position is, let's see what the market bears. What's the market? Is it for selling the building? I think we ought to leave that option open. Is it for selling this and then doing a ground lease, or is it for leasing the building? My guess, and this is only a guess, hypothesis, I think we're more likely to see parties interested in leasing the building versus buying it and ground leasing for a lengthy period of time. I could be wrong about that. I don't know. But I think the market's going to tell us that's where the demand is. To Paul's comment, I couldn't agree more. This is an FBO lease. We need to keep it as an FBO operation, in my opinion. We've lost quite a few maintenance providers on the airfield over time. Now, remember, we lost them because the tenants on the airport don't want to pay. That's a big part of it. I hate to say it, but that's a huge part of it. Before Neil Weaver passed away, he had gotten out of retail maintenance. He was performing maintenance. His wife inherited the business. They're still performing maintenance, but they're not doing retail maintenance. We have a company with a Part 141 maintenance certificate. We were operating a 141 maintenance facility at Carson City Airport. We ceased operating that 141 facility. We keep it as a satellite 141. And the reason we do it is we do have customers that come to us for specific needs, but retail maintenance, the customers on the airport don't want to pay for 141 maintenance. So we pretty much closed up shop doing that. So while I do say it's really important and consideration be given to an aircraft maintenance operation without question, the market for that drives the decision. And unfortunately, the tenants at Carson City have shown shall we say, a desire to go elsewhere for their maintenance would be a good way to put it. So I think anyone who's been around the airport long enough has seen what I'm talking about. And it's unfortunate because, yes, we do need maintenance. Unfortunately, our company does provide maintenance, but it's on a limited, scheduled, preferential customer basis. We don't take anybody in for just an annual or an oil change. We won't do that anymore. So those are my thoughts on the matter. We ought to go out to bid on this for both options. I'm not criticizing you, Corey. I just want to point out something factually about the assumptions. I want to make it really clear. And we should have discussed this on the phone yesterday, and I take responsibility for not bringing this to your attention then, but the assumptions are such that we don't have any vacancy over time. And experience tells us all that there will be vacancy at some point in time in a 50-year lease. There will be a point in time that someone will be there for 3 years, 5 years, maybe 10. It's highly unlikely that we will have 50 continuous years of tenancy and income coming out of leasing the building. And I think everybody here knows exactly what I'm referring to in that regard. But my position is let the market figure this one out.
And Mr. Chair, also, we're making an assumption that we'll keep it invested the whole time, which we wouldn't. We'd end up using it for something. So all this was just getting the thought process going, which is the best thing we could do. Just look at comparative apples for apples and give us a thought train so we can go forward. But I'm going to support the board going out to bid both.
Yeah, Stan, go ahead.
I just have one comment. I would be surprised if the city doesn't require a sprinkler system, and I really don't know why we wouldn't want to, particularly if we're going to keep it as an investment. even at the cost.
The reason why the city would not, and this is not Carson City in particular, but any municipality, the building's existing. That's why. If it was new construction,
Okay, but
new
regardless,
construction.
Why wouldn't we want to do it? That's what I'm saying.
Oh, the cost. And you, in an aircraft, yeah, the cost, and let me be very clear about this, having been down this road before with aircraft facilities, you won't be putting in a sprinkler system. That will not fly with the fire department or the FAA. You'll be putting in a foam fire suppression system, which will be excessively expensive and probably cost prohibitive for this building. So any other people want to opine on this? Any other matters? Yeah, John.
The most compelling thought that Member Pulitz brought forward, from my perspective, is the trial run concept. Yeah, let's try it for 5 years as a lease and see, and quantify some of these concerns about how much does it pressure does it add to our staff? How does it feel? How does it feel to the airport authority after we try it for a period of time? And so, what I would say that, let's if we're going to have a lease option that we bid out, let's have it be for a controlled period of time, not 50 years. Yep, and see how we like it.
Well, the only problem with a controlled period of time is sometimes it takes, Paul Hamilton, the only problem with a controlled period of time, like 5 years, someone wants to start a business, sometimes it takes 5 years to get a business going. So I sure wouldn't lease a building if I knew it was only
Yeah,
good for
neither,
5 years.
nor would
I would want 10 or 15
nor would I.
minimum,
Yeah.
because it takes that long to
Exactly.
get things going.
Get established and
Get established
to amortize your investment in the business. In that line of work, you're going to have capital expenditures without question, and you're going to need a lot more than 5 years. But again, I would support going out, creating a bid process, and seeing what we get back. That's probably the best thing, and with consideration towards an aircraft maintenance operation.
So Tim Pulis here, one question for our airport manager, Corey. Are you on board with that? Thinking that we should go out and create a public notice for bid and make it very clear that we are looking at two options. One is for a long-term lease or a lease up to 5 years, blah, 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 or a purchase.
I don't see any harm in that at all. I mean, that definitely lets the board know what the market wants, and helps in that decision-making process. And also with the lease periods, you could do a 5-year lease with a lot of really well-written language that enables the tenant to renew as long as they're a good tenant. And of course, the board would be in favor of that if everything is going well. So something else to consider.
Corey, in your experience, I know you have experience managing buildings on airport property like this. What is the typical lease term for a hangar that's being used for maintenance purposes or for an FBO?
So my experience with that is storage hangars, and not with an FBO. But it was a month-to-month agreement. And that's how that airport handled it.
Let me make a suggestion. Number one, Corey, I have a comp for you to go investigate. We'll talk about it after the meeting, but it's for an FBO facility at a local airport that has a recent lease. They do aircraft maintenance, they do charter, they do flight instruction. That's what they do. So, and they're in the area, they're just not at our airport. Let me make a suggestion that you work with Steve Takis, come up with a document or a board item for us to generate a resolution or adopt a resolution in our next meeting to put this out to bid.
And Tim Pulis, I might add, by then we might get some more clarification on some of the required leasehold improvements, so we have a better idea of what it's gonna cost for ourselves or for a purchasing. So I think a month gives us time to do that. If you come up with, if you two can come up with the proper language, think that's really the best way for this board to move forward.
Is everybody good with that?
Yeah, I just have a thought that has already been expressed, but for a, for a storage lease, sure, short term, may attract, some folks, but if you're asking someone to invest in a maintenance facility and bring in the type of infrastructure and equipment and personnel and that sort of thing, and then offer a 5-year lease,
Oh, it's not going to fly.
that'll never happen. That'll just go somewhere else. Got to be able to amortize that lease over a decent period of time. Plus, if at some point they're going to build the business up and then would have the idea of selling the business, which would have to go through the airport authority, of course, with a long-term lease, then they could have some reasonable expectation, of recovering some of their investment. I mean, that's the only thing that I would think. And as far as maintenance is concerned, like our aircraft, we need to go to a factory authorized service center. We can't just take it to somebody to, because of warranty issues on the airplane, and there's a lot of reasons. So as far as maintenance, we will be looking at smaller aircraft, I would guess.
Yes, but, keep in mind, I'll give you an example, okay? We're performing maintenance through our Satellite 141 on the airport. So we have parts for sale. We have oil for sale. We have nitrogen, oxygen service that we, work with aircraft owners on. And we do perform maintenance on a scheduled basis for certain customers. So it's not as if it's exclusively small aircraft that we work on. But on the other hand, I'm with you. Like, my aircraft has to go to a factory authorized service center. So I have to take it somewhere else. I have two choices, one in California, one in Arizona. Those are the two closest.
I think most corporate jets would be in that category. You might find a one-off,
Right.
know.
I'd like to, this Tim Pulis, I'd like to just to maybe move this along, but what I'd really like to comment though is that don't underestimate short-term leases. I'm telling you, in my experience, I don't have a tenant that wants more than a 5-year lease. They want 5-year leases with options to extend. But they want the opportunity to get out of the lease too, in case they're not making money, otherwise they're stuck legally to pay for leases they can't afford. So don't get too hung up on this short-term, long-term. Let's play that out.
Let's
Yeah.
get a resolution
right.
drawn up for our next meeting.
Yeah. And then,
okay, and go out to the market.
Yeah.
And we'll find out what
Exactly.
is out there.
And Stan reminded me if there's any public comment before
But
we.
we'll go there, yeah.
Okay.
But I would direct, Corey and Steve, let's get a resolution drafted for consideration at our next meeting. And then by doing that, we can go out to bid and determine from what we get back, from the bids, what the real demand is. So is there any public comment on this particular matter?
Hold on, Michael.
Yeah, John.
So, I think what I'm hearing from the group, but I just wanted to clarify it, is that we're going to put out a request for proposals, and a part of the proposal will be how long you want the lease to be.
Well, we're asking, no. We're asking Corey and Steve to draft a resolution for consideration of the airport authority. And that resolution will be a bid proposal, okay, where we will get bids back from potential users and let them tell us how long they want to lease it for. Do they want to lease the building? Do they want to buy the building? What their use is? What their intentions are?
Perfect. Great.
Yeah, like I said, that'll tell us what the market is. Exactly. Instead of us dictating the terms. Right.
Can I just
Yes, Steve.
ask one question just to get us on the right track here? If I heard correctly, you want the lease set up somewhat as a triple net lease, right? You want all the
Absolutely.
maintenance. Now, currently, our leases already kind of do that. You know, our ground leases, we lease you the ground, you go build the building, and you're obligated to maintain the building. And for the last 6 or 7 years, the city's had us include a provision saying, and over time, you got to do improvements to the building. And so I assume that we would incorporate those same kinds of things into a triple net lease for this one. Am I on the right track?
You're on
Okay.
the absolute right track.
Great.
And again, let's leave all options on the table in this. Let the market come to us and tell us what they want to do, how long they want to do it for, how they want to do it, what they want to pay. Pretty simple. We're going to find out, and we should probably have it be like a 60-day bid process is my thought. Give people some time, especially when you consider that this would be going out in the holiday season. Make it a 60-day bid process so that by January at some point or February 1st, we have our bids back. So, any comment from members of the public? Okay, no questions? Would you come on up, introduce yourself, sir? Green button.
The red button goes green. I'm sorry. On the microphone.
There you go.
Oh, it's black. The button's black.
Is it green now?
But it turns green there.
Yeah, we can hear you nicely.
The only question I have is if you hold out to lease it, sell it to a FBO, and there's no business here, what makes you think you're gonna?
Well, hold on a second, sir. No, first of all, can you introduce yourself, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Dave Heel. I just work for Cactus Air Force.
Okay. And I appreciate your question. I can tell you firsthand, there are FBOs that are interested.
Okay.
Okay. I know of two in particular who have been in contact with me, one specifically about this building, and another one who is looking, and I don't want to divulge too much information, to come onto the airport in no uncertain terms.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, you were
Yeah, but
saying that the locals don't want to spend the money.
Well, keep in mind, it may not be an FBO that's catering to the locals, okay? Like
Right. Well,
like
yeah,
member,
the jet
like,
stuff.
like,
yeah.
like member Norvell was saying, he takes his aircraft somewhere because he's required to.
Right.
I take my aircraft somewhere is a factory authorized service center. It could be there's a factory authorized service center looking at this airport.
I got you. Okay. Well, that'd be good.
Yeah,
That would be good.
exactly.
It would bring in some more business. Okay. I guess that's about all I wondered about. Yeah, I know you were saying that the locals don't want to spend any money on their airplanes.
Well, no. They don't
But-
want it. That's not true. What I said was that our experience has been that our based customers don't want to spend money on 141 maintenance.
Oh, I got, okay.
Yeah, they don't want to, they're looking for a different alternative. It's a good way to put it.
I got you. All right. I guess that's it.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment on the matter? Questions? Okay, Steve, Corey, you guys good? Okay, fair enough. We're going to take a short break, maybe 5 minutes, if that, and go on to the rest of our meeting, if that works by everybody. Sound good? Okay, thanks. Okay, we're going to call the meeting back into session here at 6:35. It was about 5 minutes. Take a break. And item number 2 on our public hearings is for discussion and possible action. Review and approve an increased budget for airside terminal door security. Corey, take it away.
Okay, so this item is something that I noticed as an issue as soon as I started here. The door for airside access from the main airport terminal is unlocked. And if you're in the terminal, you are able to access the airport. This is a problem primarily for events, and there might be people in the terminal that are not actually authorized to have access to the airport. There's nothing discouraging them or preventing them from accessing the airport. I had this item put in the most recent budget, and that was approved. Whenever I got the quotes for the work, it came in right at budget. We had a meeting with the company that was going to be doing the work and the fire department to make sure that everything would be to code, and it was determined that it would not be to code. The building, being from the 1960s, has too many problems with it, and we're not able to completely restrict access to the airport. It has to be able to be used as an emergency exit. The additional hardware, in order to make it to where it can still be used as an emergency exit, exceeded the budget that we currently have. In order to do both the improvements for the access control and to make it to where the door can be used as an emergency exit, would put it at around $12,000 instead of the initially planned $7,000. The improvements would make it so that the door can be used if needed, but an alarm would sound and airport staff would be notified. This is a big deterrent for anyone who may want to access the airport without authorization, and airport staff would be able to respond as needed, contact the sheriff's department if we needed to. There is another option here where that could also be supported by a security camera, so airport staff would be able to reference that. I don't have an exact quote for that item, but it shouldn't exceed about $5,000 for us to do a camera. The bulk of that cost is actually a license. We would have to purchase a license, and for it to line up with the other cameras, it would be a 10-year license, and it would integrate with our current system that we have in place. So the $5,000 would be majority of that cost would be for that license. The hardware is not really all that expensive. But I don't have the exact numbers on that. I think that if it's approved for $5,000 or potentially approved for what that cost may be, would be beneficial. And I am prepared to give more details about the system if the board would like to ask any more questions about that.
I have some questions for you, Corey, for clarification.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I'm lost a little bit. I must be missing something. Which door is this? Is this the doors that lead out to the parking lot from the building?
This is the airside door in the
Airside
terminal.
door. Okay,
Yep.
in the terminal.
Yep.
Got it. Okay, so the one that leads out to the alcove, the glass alcove, that protects it from the wind and elements.
Yes.
Okay.
Both of the doors actually have that.
Okay.
But this would be the door that if you go through it, you're now on the airport.
You're now on the airport.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the issue is that right now you can open it, right?
With no restrictions.
Restriction, but we need restriction for security purposes.
Right.
But we have to have it available as an emergency exit.
Correct.
Okay. So John Q. Public flies in and he punches the code on the door to let himself in. Now, how does he get out? what if he wants to get out? Okay,
He would use the same code
to get out.
to get out. That's correct.
Okay,
Transient pilots would still have access to the terminal and the ability to
That's-
get out.
that's the
And
clarification we
it would
needed.
be through a key code.
Okay,
And the pilots would have the ability to
okay.
figure out what that is.
So here's what I'm going to recommend you do before you go too far with this.
Mm-hmm.
Get in touch with John Dickinson at Lake Tahoe Airport.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? If you don't want to get in touch with him, go there personally and look at what he did. He has the exact same situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a keypad entry going in from the ramp to get into the building. Emergency exit going out unless the pilot punches in the code.
That's
Okay.
it sounds exactly like what we're trying to do.
And I would tell you to look at what he has.
I will do that. Yeah.
Yeah, because he has that right now. He didn't put it in, by the way. It was put in before his time, but it's relatively new.
Mm-hmm. The only addition to that is if you did have an access card, that would also work.
Exactly. You can put your card up against the reader.
Yep.
And the thing unlocks itself, and you just go out.
Right.
Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, Tim Pulis. Corey, I sat in that chair for a few months too. So if I'm not mistaken, the way it's set up default is that the outside street side door is left locked during the day, and it's the inside door that we have a code or we unlock it during the day. That's correct. Isn't that what? And the problem we have is that nobody can get into the terminal from the outside.
Right.
Even if they would want to, if they had a code. This is going to alleviate that, right? It's going to allow people to get into the terminal if they have due process code or card, whatever you determine, so that we can get them in and they can go through legitimately.
This is a critical step to move towards that.
That's what I'm hoping, because that's the problem. I mean, you should be able to get into the terminal if you have authorized it, if you're authorized.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you have a gate card, or you have the code, and you can get in. If you try to get out and you don't have the code or the gate card, it's an emergency alarm.
Right.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
I fully support this.
Yeah, absolutely. Turn my mic on. That's the clarity that we needed. I certainly wasn't following it. I don't know about you folks, but now I understand completely. So where do you want us to go with this, Corey?
The one more factor is the camera
Mhm.
addition to it, which I don't have an exact quote for the cost. Go ahead, John.
I'm going to propose that we have a motion to approve up to a certain amount, and I think that the correct amount is 20 grand. It's
Okay.
12 now.
You're the
plus,
treasurer.
Yeah, 12 now plus 5 plus contingencies.
Okay.
Authorize Corey to get what he needs, including a
Okay.
camera.
Okay.
But with a not to exceed price of 20 grand.
That's
Would that work for you, Corey?
It's great.
okay. We got a motion, and I'm with you. You're learning, Tim. We have a motion and a second to approve a $20,000 budget for required improvements to the airside terminal door for access control.
I'll second that.
And we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Get in touch with John, okay, up at Tahoe. See if you can make arrangements to go see his door. His
Sounds good.
doors. Yeah,
I need to
he-
get up there anyway to
he
see his airport. So
he has exactly what you're talking about doing.
perfect.
And it stymies me all the time. But I go to hit the code, I push the door, and the alarm goes off. But they also have a way to decommission the alarm like that when they know it's an authorized exit onto the ramp.
I think the camera is really important, but to help staff. I mean, now it's 3 in the morning.
You know what?
on a Sunday morning, and
what-
here goes the alarm, and it's like if you can see what it is,
What
would be
could-
super helpful.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong that we might need a camera? Okay, we will move on now to item number 3, discussion and possible action. Adoption of updated through the fence fees for Carson City Airport to reflect the current cost of airport maintenance and amount of hangar space and aircraft parking, and approve an amendment to Carson City Municipal Code 10.03.060. The fees to reflect the update. Go ahead, Corey and Steve.
Okay, I'll take the lead on this one. Steve Takis, Airport Council. This is for the through the fence fees. These are in Title 19 of the Carson Municipal Code. Through the fence fees existed before the Airport Authority was formed in 1989. Back then, it was a flat $250 a year for, through the fence access. At one point, the chairman of the Airport Authority was David Correo, and he said, I really think the through the fence fees should reflect the cost that aircraft impose on the airport, and we should reassess the through the fence fee on that basis. And so what he did is he did an analysis of the maintenance costs on the airport, calculated what the per square foot of hangar equivalent of the maintenance costs are. So he basically took all the maintenance costs, divided it by the square feet of hangar space on and adjacent to the airport, and came up with a through the fence fee. In 2016, we were audited by the FAA for a land use audit, and they had a number of findings, one of which was we had not updated the through the fence fees in 8 years, and they found that to be a violation of the same FAA assurance that Corey had read earlier, which is that we have to manage the airport in a way that we charge fair rates to sustain our existence. So at that point, the Airport Authority, as soon as we got the audit report, we got together, and Linda Law was the chairperson at the time, redid the calculation with current maintenance costs and raised the through the fence fees. We adopted the change here, then we took it to the city because it has to flow through Title 19 of the city ordinance. During that audit, I had many meetings with the auditor, as did Tim Rowe, who was then the airport manager, and many discussions, and there were a lot of issues. Through the fence has always been a hot button to the FAA. They don't like it, and they scrutinize it pretty strongly. And they don't like it because they're concerned about the security of the airport. They're concerned about people doing aviation activities off the airport. And in a way, they're kind of a parent looking out for the kid. They want to make sure that if there's an aviation activity, it's under the control and is benefiting the airport, not somebody off airport. But be that as it may, they had a number of criteria that they told us. And in one of those meetings, and it may have been just with me, the auditor told me in no uncertain terms, we need to update the through the fence fee every 5 years. I've been asked to find that. I thought I might find it in one of the many emails we exchanged. I have not found it. So it's only based on my recollection of that meeting. I've suggested to the airport manager, feel free to call the ADO and just ask them, is that still true? But I can tell you right now, 8 years is too long because they found that to be a violation. And so earlier this year, much earlier this year, I think it was April or May, I was asked to give you guys a briefing on through the fence. And that was a briefing that included discussions of the parcel that was adjacent to the airport, which I think at that time had already been purchased by Carson Tahoe, and the Title 19 code. And at the end of that briefing, I said in there, hey guys, it's time to update the through the fence. More recently, Corey and I were looking at something, and it may or may not have involved a Carson Tahoe executive, I don't remember, but most of our discussions lately have been regarding through the fence with them because they have raised the issue many times with us. And I again noticed, oops, we still haven't adjusted those fees. And so I asked Corey to proceed with that on the agenda, and that's why it's on here. Corey has done the new calculation of what the fees are. Over the last 5 years, it's about a 20% increase in the fees. We currently only have 2 through the fence operators. Mustang Manufacturing and Click Bond. And the fee that they pay, as set forth in the ordinance, is offset by the property taxes that we get. So here on the airport, there are real property taxes on the improvements, not on the dirt, because the dirt is owned by the municipality. But on the improvements, they pay us property taxes. And well, they don't pay us. They submit the property taxes. I think they go to the state. They get chopped up. Most of it goes to education, but a chunk comes back to Carson City. For hangars, it comes back to the airport. And that's true whether they're hangars on the airport or they're hangars through the fence. That's the written agreement that the airport has with the city. And so to the extent that somebody has a hangar on the outside and it has value and they're paying property taxes, it offsets either all or a portion of the through the fence fee because we're getting the money that way. And so the end result is I don't know what whether this will have an impact on our existing through the fence permittees. I can tell you if there's somebody new that comes along and builds new hangars on the outside, pretty sure thing that the property taxes are going to outpace the through the fence fee. So we're going to get that money anyway. But that's what's going on here. And so because it's been 5 years, we've done the calculations, and in the board memo, I give you both the prior or existing language of Title 19 and the new language with the new numbers cranked in, and the new numbers are essentially a 20% increase. And I'm available for any questions.
Let me point out a couple of typographical errors. Number one, when I read the agenda item, it's on the agenda as Municipal Code 10.03.060. Correction, it is Carson City Municipal Code Title 19.03.060. On the proposed fees, item number 1, for properties with hangars, the greater of a fee of $900 or 43 cents per square foot. However, the verbiage says 36 cents. So that needs to be corrected if we're going to adopt these new fees.
That's a good catch, and that was my haste on putting this together.
That's
I
no
missed
problem.
those two.
That's why there's another set of eyes reading it. And again, I'm going to reiterate what you had said, Steve, because this is very important for everybody to understand. These fees are relatively trivial in nature, especially when you consider what the permit holder gets in return. And to boot, if their property taxes on their hangar off airport exceed the through the fence permit fee, they don't pay the through the fence permit fee. So in a sense, this is a moot point. And there's only 2 users today, 2 permit holders that are existing today that would be affected, and their property taxes likely exceed the new fee. So on that, I'll open it up to discussion. I know John has some comments. Take it away.
So I'd just like to ask Corey, and I already know the answer, but I want to put it on the record. Do we currently collect any through the fence fees from anybody?
As of right now, we haven't received any through the fence permit fees because of the property taxes.
Yeah,
About
that's
4,
not-
I think about 4 years.
So that is sort of, and reinforces your moot point. Yeah. And that's likely to be true going forward, and not guaranteed. So with and for those of you that haven't, read this in super detail, that's what is that? That's the item 3. Is that right? In the where they for properties hangers, blah 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 blah. Properties hangers in addition to the fee. Okay. Oh yeah, this item 3 is where that defines the property tax offset. So currently we collect no through the fence fees, and that's likely to continue. So my perspective on this is that that we don't need to take any action. In 2020, we did a thorough, and those of you who were here, we did a complete review of all airport fees, including the through the fence fee, and we published our fees going forward. There's no indication that in 2020 that there was a recalculation of the through the fence fees. There's no indication in 2020 that there wasn't a recalculation of them. We don't know if anybody did any labor to come up with the through the fence fees that were published in 2020, but we published a set of fees. And so I think the 5-year time frame is appropriate, but I think that that belongs in 2025, not this year. Then the only thing that else that I wanted to mention was that the way that Corey has done the calculations is he used last year as a reference for for what the airport expenses were that we used to determine through the fence fees. And I would opine that that last year was not a representative year for the airport. Tim and I filled the manager's chair for half the year as volunteers. And so I think we're under, if we were to use last year, we would understate some of our costs. So I think it would be, that's, you could argue that we ought to just assume and go forward. But I think that certainly by 2025, we may well have a more representative situation where we have identified all the airport's fees. And then the last thing that I'd like to mention is that I don't think it's trivial to just change Title 19. I mean, we don't get to change that without the city's review and approval. So if we do decide to change Title 19, I really think what we ought to do is get the reference to actual fees out of Title 19 completely and just say, hey, for fees relative to through the fence access, see the airport's listing of fees. And then we should review and update all of our fees every 5 years and just reference that in Title 19 if we're going to change it. So, but I don't think we actually need to change it because Section 1 in the that is shown here says that we can change those fees from time to time at our discretion, and we've been doing that. So I think that one, in order to be in compliance, we don't need to do anything until 2025. Fiscal impact of anything that we do on this motion is zero. And then I think that if we're going to change Title 19, we ought to get the fees out of Title 19. But I think that we don't actually need to change Title 19 in order to be compliant with Title 19. So there's my comments. So what I would say is that my proposed motion in this matter would be that we decide as a board, we're going to do a review of all fees every 5 years. The next one's going to occur in 2025, and that we don't change Title 19. That would be my recommendation.
So it would really be we take no action on this matter at this time. Your very best comment in there, my opinion, okay, was the fact that if we were assessing this based on cost, John is right. If we were using last year for cost, that was not representative of true cost. That's an extremely good point. And if we're going to take action, we might want to reconsider what the costs are for the current fiscal year, the true costs. So, Harlow, you have anything you want to add to this? Okay. Yeah, Stan.
No, it's been 5 years since we adjusted it, and you could certainly do what Member Rogers is recommending. And when the FAA looks to see the rates for through the fence haven't changed in 8 years again, I wonder how they'll treat that. What do you think will happen when they say you've just violated for the second time after you've corrected it once because we did an audit? And here's the other thing is there's no restriction on how often you do it. And if your feeling is this isn't really going to change things, go ahead and adopt this one now and then pick it up again in 2 years when you've got more accurate data and throw it in with the rest of them and do it on a cycle like Member Rogers is suggesting. There's no harm in doing that, but I just have to tell you as your counsel, I think if you don't do it now, you are running the risk of violating or being in violation of of what the FAA has told us. And I don't want you to do that, particularly where you're giving the sleeves out of your vest. The other thing is, don't characterize it as we're not getting any through the fence fees. It should be characterized as we're getting the through the fence fees, we're getting it through property taxes, because that's the way we would want to, at least explain it to the FAA.
Okay.
We are recovering our costs.
Um,
Did I answer your question, Stan?
Well, yeah, my point is, it doesn't hurt us to do this now. It doesn't hurt a
It
thing.
doesn't hurt to do it. Member Rogers is right about one other thing. It's not trivial to change Title 19 because then we bring it to the city. The city has to have 2 readings because they're changing an ordinance, and then the city changes it. However, where we've done this before, where we're just updating something, it hasn't been a very controversial item with the city. I just don't think it's going to be that big a deal. The other thing is I would be worried about is if we had a Title 19 that said, here are the rates, and instead we charge something else because we have a line at the end that says from time to time we can adjust it. If we're going to go down that road, then I think the better approach is to do what Member Rogers suggested, if it can be done. I haven't done the research on it, which is take it out of here completely and just have a provision saying the rates for through the fence will be shown on the airport's webpage or something like that. I don't know if we can do that. I haven't done the research on that, but certainly that would be a way to fix it so it would be a lot easier to deal with going forward. I agree with Member Rogers on that. But for right now, I would say the easiest path is adopt the change with the corrections that the chairman made, and then get on down the road. And when you get to 2025, look at them again and look at them with all the other fees. That makes sense to me too.
Paul, you had a comment?
Yeah, we got Paul Hamilton, we got a red flag with the FAA, so let's handle that and get it done. So
Okay.
there's no misunderstanding, and yeah, if we can change Title 19 to reflect this in some other way, that sounds like a good idea.
Tim, do you have anything you want to add to this?
I think we should follow Mr. Takis's advice on this.
Okay. On that note, I would recommend somebody make a motion at this juncture.
I move to approve the updated TAT fees through the fence fees, adopt the proposed version of Carson City Municipal Code 19.03.060 and undertake the process with the Board of Supervisors to update the Carson City Municipal Code Title 19.
And I will note that that is as corrected
Right.
as we discussed. Second on that?
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the updated through the fence fees, adopt the proposed version of Carson City Municipal Code 19.03.060 as corrected, and undertake the process with the Board of Supervisors to update Carson City Municipal Code Title 19. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so we have 5 yes, 1 opposed. Did you get that one? Okay, good deal. Motion carries. Airport managers report, please.
Okay, so this is Corey. Fuel flowage is up. That's 2 months in a row because we didn't cover August yet. August was way up at 121% over the previous year, and that is due to the fires last year. There was almost very little activity at the airport last year. There's also a big increase for September at 41%. It's probably also due to wildfires, but it wasn't as big of an impact. So I worked with InVogue, our marketing company that we work with, to make some updates to our website. We really just replaced some outdated items and updated some of the formatting and kind of brought it up. Still needs a lot of work. It's something I'll continue to work on, but we put a lot of effort into it. A couple of big expenses. We did a purchase for sign panels and fixtures to replace fading or incorrect signage in the airport. That came out to be $14,188.30. That was within budget, and that is going to be a big improvement on the airport. I intend to do this annually in phases as our budget allows to make sure that these old faded signs are legible to pilots. We're not held to 139 standards, but we need to have those signs closer to the 139 requirements, which they're very far from right now. We also received a Bobcat. So we purchased this Bobcat we ordered the Bobcat about a year ago, or a little bit over a year. And of course, with the delays, took a long time to get it. This was in the budget originally, and the board approved the additional expense for the Bobcat previously. So that put the final purchase price right at the new budget. It did exceed that very slightly. I think it was a few $100s. That was $82,121.70. Rick Lee has already gone to work with training and putting it to work. It's going to be a very good tool for the airport, that's for sure. And I think that we'll have a lot of expansion capability with it to make it more useful as we learn more about it and what we can actually get accomplished with it. And hopefully the snow removal equipment will be soon after that, as we heard from Armstrong earlier. The entry sign is scheduled for installation November 14th and November 15th. So we should finally get our new sign in front of the airport pretty soon here. Rick Lee and I have put in a lot of work on the entry landscaping. We are trying to get that project accomplished, but it's definitely proving to be very difficult, primarily because the companies that we're reaching out to are not getting back to us with quotes, and we're not really finding anybody who's willing to do the work. We have reached out to our engineering consultant and other aviation engineering consultants in the area for feedback, and we've been getting some positive feedback from them. And we've gotten some more company names that we can reach out to, and we're going to continue to work on that. Rick and I believe that one of the primary reasons this is happening is because this project consists of both pavement work and landscaping. So we are going to start kind of separating those two projects out to find companies that can do the demolition and pavement work, and companies that can do the landscaping work. They would have to work together on the project to accomplish it, but the pavement work is really just outside of the scope of what most landscaping companies are going to be able to accomplish. Ideally, we can find companies that are going to be willing to do it and sub another company out. So we'll definitely keep all options on the table, but we're having to think outside of the box and approach this a little bit differently. But we're definitely actively working on it. And hopefully we'll find a resolution here. Obviously, the final product is going to have to go through the bidding process because it's going to be a very expensive project. So we'll see what companies are willing to do what, and we'll position those bids accordingly once we figure out how we can actually get this accomplished. We held a FAA safety meeting at the airport terminal on September 28th. This was hosted by Larry Cheek. At least 35 individuals attended this meeting. The topic was pilot decision-making and pattern operations. And this is something that hasn't happened at the airport in quite a while due to COVID-19. And now we're kind of able to start doing that again. And I've kind of pressured the FAA into doing this, and that pressure has worked, and they're starting to do it again. Sounds like Larry is going to try to schedule this on a fairly regular basis. I participated in an FAA surface safety webinar. This covered all aspects of driving on the movement area of an airport, including snow removal operations. It was a good training. We held a preseason snow and ice control meeting, and representatives from the FBO operators attended, and Rick presented a review of the snow and ice control plan. There was no action items identified during that, but we feel like we're prepared for the snow season. Aircraft operations for September were 2,553 according to the ADSB data, and the detailed charts of those operations are below. And that's all that I have.
Legal counsel's report.
I don't have anything additional to report on.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Treasurer's report.
You have the balance sheet and income statements before you. There's only two things on them that I'm not, that make them seem junkier than they actually are. And that is, and I thought I'd just mention that, we currently are showing no real personal property tax receipts for this year, and that sort of throws the budget comparisons off. And that's because we have not received our final accounting, the check from the city. We have an accounting from them for what those personal property taxes are going to be, but we haven't received the money yet. When that comes in, then the budget versus actual will look a lot better, because we'll actually have, that number won't be zero anymore. And then the other thing that's kind of an anomaly, which is not going to go away anytime soon, is way down at the bottom, net other income, second to last item on the budget and the P&L reports. We're showing a positive income from our activities relative to FAA projects of almost $300,000. And that is just a quirk of timing. We spent that money last fiscal year, and we received the income from that money this fiscal year. And so it also makes the numbers look kind of squirrely, but it's just a quirk of the fact that the difference between spending the money and getting the money reimbursed from the city spanned over the end of a fiscal year. So other than that, I have no additional comments.
Okay, thanks, John. Any comments, reports from airport authority members? Okay, seeing none, I'd entertain public comment, but I don't see members of the public present. So on that note, just going to give you a quick preview of something that we anticipate to be on the agenda for our next meeting, which will be that resolution we discussed for the Shade Tree Aviation Building. And we also anticipate, with no guarantees, that we will have a proposal to lease about 1.5 acres of land along Taxiway Bravo for hangar development. So, on that note, we are adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen.